Everyone for joining us. My name is Manuel Hernandez. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Latinos, Latina Motivating Action here in Chicago, or ALMA for short. We want to thank you all for joining us. This very important forum where we'll discuss LGBTQ plus issues, specifically those around Black and Brown communities, with our invited mayoral candidates. I would also like to give a thanks to our co-sponsoring organizations, Affinity, Community Services, Brave Space Alliance, Equality Illinois, Task Force, Life is Work, the Chicago Black Gay Men's Caucus. And so we'll move on forward, and I'll have Dr. Green and our next speakers to introduce our moderators, and Zahara Bassett, I'm sorry.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Keith Green, the Executive Director for the Chicago Black Gay Men's Caucus. It is an honor to introduce this Chicago legend and icon. Kim Hunt is currently the Executive Director at Pride Action Tank and the Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy Operations at the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. Kim has led projects and initiatives that improve the lives of LGBTQ communities, such as systemic change to support LGBTQ plus older adults and LGBTQ plus youth in foster care, and addressing challenges faced by non-binary transgender individuals. Kim ensures that the voices of the LGBTQ plus community are not only heard, but that the community is engaged from beginning to end, from gathering the gifts of personal stories to actionable legislative changes. Kim was the first executive director of Affinity Community Services, a position held until 2015, and served on several civic councils, boards, committees, and commissions. Kim has been recognized by numerous organizations for their hard work and dedication to advancing and advocating for the lives of LGBTQ plus communities. Subsequently, Kim was inducted into the Chicago LGBTQ plus Hall of Fame in 2006. I present to you Kim Hunt.
Hello, everybody. My name is Moni Ruiz Velasco. I know Kim is going to jump on. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Deputy Director of Equality Illinois. Just as we get started and before I pass it over to Kim, I wanted to make sure to go over some of our community guidelines. We just, we have over 130 people logged on right now. We're excited to have you all here. We have it set up so that our audience members' cameras and mics are disabled during the forum so that we can make sure and hear from the candidates and our moderators. We're going to have an opportunity for question and answer, so we encourage everyone to submit your questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. We know that we may not be able to get to all of them, and Commissioner Johnson, who's agreed to be here, has also agreed to answer any questions after the forum and submit the answers to us in writing, and we will be circulating that to everyone who has logged on today. When you submit your question, please include your name and the neighborhood or ward if you live in, if you'd like to do that. Please, we ask folks to refrain from using offensive language and be respectful to others as we're in community here. And like I said, we will be sharing responses via email if we don't get to everyone's question. So thank you for being here. And with that, I'll pass it over to Kim. And Kim, I apologize if I stepped ahead of you.
You are all good, honey. I think we're actually going to pass it to Commissioner Johnson to say some opening remarks. And then I've got some questions for him. And then we've got, going to make space for the audience to ask questions as well.
Yeah, and the commissioner will be here at 8:10. So we have about 3 minutes of time.
Ooh, countdown, party time.
Yeah, we want to talk a little bit maybe about how this came together. Manuel or anybody else who wants to jump in.
Yes, so the idea of the forum came together being that our organizations are at the forefront and work directly with our community. The LGBTQ plus population in Chicago is 7.5%. We make up a big part of this community, and 70% of the population identifies as non-white. So we as a community we exist, we live and thrive at the intersection of these identities. And so the next mayor is in a position to really lead the charge in including the LGBT BIPOC community in everything it does, being the leader in protecting our rights, in fighting and advocating for our rights, and also those within our community that are being targeted, specifically Black trans lives. And so the next mayor of our city is gonna have to lead the way in that fight.
Can I pop in and say this is reminiscent of Mayoral Candidate Forum that people of color-led organizations did when our Rahm Emanuel first ran for office. And it is so good to see our community come together again to do this very important work to help give voice and visibility to the LGBTQ plus, especially the BIPOC part of the community, as well as ensure that folks who are running for office come through here, because this is a very important population in the city of Chicago. So thank y'all. We still have another whole minute left.
And we want to also thank you greatly, Kim. Right, the bio's only a couple of sentences. You tried to sum up everything that you've done, and words fall short of the work that you have put in to our community and continue to do. And so we thank you so much for your willingness to moderate, but also your availability to the community and to always being there for us. And so we want to thank you greatly.
Y'all gonna make me cry. This ain't about me. This is about all those 153 people so far. I will note for folks, both candidates were invited to this forum. Only one accepted the invitation, and that is Commissioner Johnson. So you make of that what you want. I see Commissioner Johnson coming on, and there's his beautiful family in picture.
Hey, what's up, everyone? What's up? One second.
Hello, thank you, and welcome. Welcome to our event tonight. We're excited to see you. We know you're super busy, and we really appreciate you making time. I'm gonna just spend 1 minute because we really want to hear from you. So just want to introduce you to the audience who's here, and just mention the organizations again. ALMA, the Chicago Black Gay Men's Caucus, Brave Space Alliance, Life is Work, Task Force Prevention and Community Service, Affinity, and of course, Equality Illinois. And so we're really, really happy to have you join this important discussion. So just want to introduce, we have 154 people listening to us tonight, and we know we'll be sending a recording of this to almost 300 people who registered. So this is going to get a lot of viewership, and we want to introduce Commissioner Brandon Johnson, who's my commissioner for a little bit longer, and want to also introduce him as the candidate who accepted our invitation to be here for mayor of Chicago. And I know a lifelong resident of the west side of Chicago. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kim, who's going to kick it off for us. So thank you again so much for being with us.
Thank you, Moni. Commissioner Johnson, do you want to just take a few moments to tell the folks about yourself and all the wonderful things you do before I jump into questions? And you're,
yeah, just a quick minute because I want to make sure that there's plenty of time for questions. So just thank you all for gathering tonight. Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for being willing to do it virtually. Clearly, I'm on my way to one more stop this evening. And, I've been, very, grateful to have an opportunity to serve the city of Chicago as a public school teacher. Started my career teaching in Cabrini Green and teaching on the West Side, Garfield Park at Westinghouse College Prep, the West Side where my wife and I are raising our 3 children. And we love it. We do. We love it. Every part of it. And we recognize that in order to have a better, stronger, safer Chicago, we have to be committed to investing in people. And that's really what this campaign has been about from one end of the city to the other, where people are coming together around our hopes and our dreams and turning our hopes into votes and our votes into policy. A multicultural, multi-generational movement that has propelled a working class middle child with 9 siblings into a position where we can literally not just debate our desires, but we get to elect our desires. And so today I'm just humbly submitting to this opportunity, to take the platform that we've put together and put it into practice. And, thank you, Moni, for your work and your organizing effort and all of the folks who have been transformational in your efforts to make sure that we are expressing the best part of ourselves, which is, again, our love for one another and making sure that our humanity is front and center in everything we do. So thank you. And I look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you for that. And we know that you just left the debate. You are obviously on the road doing your thing, but you made time for us and we really, really, really appreciate that. I've heard you speak before, so I know that you will be on point and succinct so that we can get in some questions from the audience as well. So I'll start. And I encourage folks in the audience to keep putting your questions in the chat because Moni is going to come to those in about 15 or 20 minutes. So first question, and we always got to start with a statement just to provide some context. Chicago has been named the best city in the US for 6 consecutive years, but this does not ring true for all who live in the city. Chicago leads all other US cities in deaths of trans and gender nonconforming people, TGNC, making it one of the deadliest cities in the world for TGNC individuals, especially Black trans women, according to the Human Rights Campaign and ABC and the Chicago Tribune 2022 reporting. Almost 80% of these murders go unsolved. So here's the question. If elected, what will you specifically do to not only improve the solve rate of murders of trans people, but to ensure the safety of trans and gender nonconforming individuals?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's best that we start with the back end of that question. Look, we have to make sure that we are doing everything in our power at every single in every single agency, affirming our trans community. When I taught in the Chicago public schools, I never forget it. A kid named Keith, who is now, is a trans Black woman, and I believe Keith is now Aaliyah, and I just heard about that yesterday. And I remember him, at that time when he was identifying as he, him, the mental health challenges that did not get treated. And I want to make sure that our trans women, particularly our Black trans women, are affirmed, that they are provided with the mental health support that they need as truth comes alive in them, as well as making sure that there are supportive services, particularly around housing, that will reduce and limit the vulnerability that they're oftentimes exposed to. And as far as solving the violence, it's why I'm committed on day one to train and promote 200 more detectives. And part of that training has to be around making sure that we're actually solving these type of violent acts, because these acts will continue if people believe they can get away with it. And so it's about prevention first, obviously, but it's also about making sure that we are solving the violence that is happening against our Black trans women in particular, and I'm very much committed to that.
Thank you for your response. Next question. As is evident by the group of organizations that have co-sponsored this forum, some portions of our communities heavily rely on the services we all provide. Will you commit to increasing funding for Black, Latinx, and people of color led and serving LGBTQ plus organizations in Chicago?
Yes, absolutely. You know, look, one of the biggest challenges that we have in the city of Chicago is the funding that we do release as a city. It oftentimes gets concentrated outside of the very community in which we are most vulnerable and where the impact is the greatest. And so this is why I'm committed to an office dedicated to LGBTQ plus community to make sure that the funding that we do receive, and as we work to increase that funding, that we are directing those dollars towards the communities that have been harmed the most. And certainly our Black and Brown communities are top of mind. And sorry about the siren.
No worries. I live across the street from a fire station. You may hear sirens on my end too. Thank you for that response. Next question. Historically, Black, Latinx, and communities of color have been pitted against each other in a fabricated zero-sum game, fueling the false narrative that advancement for one community is at the expense of the other. How will you ensure that does not happen during your administration?
Yeah, thank you for lifting up the fact that it's fabricated, right? There's actually examples where our communities have worked together. And so one of the ways that I've committed to doing this is making sure that we are, first of all, planning, being intentional about conversations, and then 3, being collaborative in our approach towards the resources and the services that our respective communities deserve and need. And to your point, I've said this multiple times along the campaign trail, no one has to lose at the expense of someone else winning. And the type of division that is, has been instigated, quite frankly, and initiated by outside forces, we're going to make sure that the way my campaign is being operated right now, that's how we're going to govern. That's another way in which we can ensure that our communities work together. I'm grateful and humbled to have a multi-generational, multicultural movement. So from Delia Ramirez and Congressman Garcia, to Congressman Davis and Congressman Jonathan Jackson, right, to Jan Schakowsky. But there is real clear examples of, Black and Brown community leaders, elected leaders, faith leaders that have come around, who have surrounded my candidacy. And that's the type of governance that we're going to share together. And I'm very much committed to that. It's what I've been committed to as a teacher, as an organizer, as a Cook County Commissioner, working with Alma Anaya, now with Anthony Quesada, who is there, and demonstrating that our ability to work together actually puts our communities in a much stronger position. So I'm very much committed to that. And the assurance is already being established through our platform, and of course through our endorsements, through the way our campaign is expressing, and also the way we will govern.
Quick follow-up to that. How will you work with the city council to ensure this situation does not happen there either?
No, that's a fair question. Look, there's been some challenges there, right? And, I'm grateful though that, people like Byron Sigcho Lopez, Rossana Rodriguez, Jeanette Taylor and Pat Dow, right? Carlos, I can keep naming names. Matt Martin, Maria Hatton, Andre Vasquez. We the coalition that we are already forming, again, it predates us being elected officials. Byron and Jeanette were organizers with me, and now we're in a position, as we have done together collectively as organizers, we are now in a position to run one of the largest economies in the world. And so that program did not start when we begin to circulate petitions. We've been struggling together for conservatively 10 to 12 years. And so I'm looking forward to continuing to build that operation through our legislative agenda on the city council. So thank you for that follow-up.
Quick note for the audience. Commissioner is doing a great job of being on point and succinct. I just have a couple more questions. So keep putting your questions in the chat because we're going to be turning to you real soon at the rate that we're going. So let me just say, this is off script. I have moderated many forums with candidates and elected officials. And sometimes you give folks the mic, you don't know when you're going to get it back. I love how you are answering the questions, keeping it short and sweet, but also being thorough. I also note to the audience, because some folks have recently joined us and didn't hear the opening, both mayoral candidates were invited to the forum tonight. Commissioner Johnson accepted that invitation. Paul Vallis did not. Both were at a debate moments before this forum started. And Commissioner Johnson is actually between events, but has made time to be with us here today. So just wanted to note that. So next question, and again, keep putting those questions in the chat. As a community organizer, you just mentioned this recently, you know the importance of ensuring a place at tables of power. Nothing about us without us. Will you commit to parity by ensuring LGBTQ+ representation in positions at every level of your administration and on boards and commissions?
Yeah, absolutely. Quite frankly, I believe we should start preparing for transition now. I know that's a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because we don't want to come across, counting chickens before they are hatched, as they say. And we want to be ready. We'll have 6 weeks in between April 4th and May 15th. And so I'm very much committed to the type of diverse perspective that we have to bring to government. Because we all know, I'm not perfect. I have blind spots like everyone else. And I want to make sure that there are people around us who love the city of Chicago and the people of the city of Chicago enough to challenge us, even our allies, right? And this is something that's important to me because there's going to be a lot of attention on my administration, right? The expectations of the other person will be, what they are, right? Because there's not a lot of hope that he is putting forth. Our campaign, obviously, is the complete opposite of that. And because we want to see real transformation in the city of Chicago and really be a marker for the rest of the country, we have to have the best and brightest and the most talented, gifted people who understand the needs of people. And that's something that's important to me. My bottom line is this: compassionate, collaborative, and competent. So you got to love people, you got to listen to people. And as my mother said, don't be raggedy. Don't embarrass me, right? And so compassionate, collaborative, and competent. People have those skills. They're gonna fit in really well in my administration. And I'm looking forward to receiving the resumes starting tonight.
All right, y'all heard that. This is my last question for you. Just recently, you were endorsed by a large number of pastors, some of whom have been historically anti-LGBTQ. Can you address concerns from the community about these endorsements?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I've shared this before. There's no secret. I was raised in one of the largest Black denominations in the entire country. I think it's actually one of the largest Black denominations in the world. My parents were pastors. My grandfather was a pastor. And so, my faith is certainly, something that I'm, that I respond to my faith, my core values, right? And I also do recognize that within all of our faith communities, that there are elements of our faith community that they don't get it right, And I'm grateful to have parents, and I won't go too long because, you gave me strict instructions. But one of the things that I do appreciate about my parents, in the late 80s, early 90s, my parents were pastors, and Julie and Vanessa came to our home. At the time, we didn't know that Julie and Vanessa had finally decided to live freely and openly as a gay couple. And their children had to come live with us. And Julie and Vanessa were members of our church, and so were their children. And it was a tough transition, as you can imagine, in the late 80s, going into the early 90s. And I remember my foster brother, Rod, who was angry. He was confused. He struggled. And my parents work through all of those dynamics with Julie and Vanessa and their children. And as you can imagine, and again, my father is, a leader in one of the most fundamentalist Black denominations in the country, arguably the world. And, we weren't raised to tolerate people. Yeah, I know that was the word that was used in the 90s. Like, it wasn't about tolerance, right? It wasn't even about acceptance. It was about like how we love people. And, there will be times when people who are close to me, we will have disagreements. And there will be times when we will agree. And I think the remarkable dynamic about my candidacy is not just simply, some members in my faith community, that have, a perspective that I think is short-sighted and not guided. But I also have forces who are with me at the table who've had differences, with my position as a unionist. And there are staunch enemies, if you will, politically, that have been at odds for 30 years, and they're both at my table. I think this is actually something that's encouraging. This is an opportunity to educate people and make people stronger and better. And we get to do that as a collective group. And we don't have to be afraid of one another. We get to challenge each other, as I said, friends and allies, how we can be better. And that's the part I'm actually looking forward to. I'm built for this. I'm not sure my parents knew back in the 80s and 90s, that their son would run for the mayor of the city of Chicago. But I think it's actually quite remarkable that, we had the opportunity very young to learn how to make sure that even our own faith, to challenge it when it doesn't respect, the views and the values of what ultimately I believe our faith challenges us to do. And that's to have love and grace for one another.
Thank you so much for your responses to this segment of the forum. I am going to turn it over to Moni to introduce one of my favorite people on the planet so she can do the next section.
Thanks. I think we're going to turn it over to Zahara. She's
Yes. Thank you.
My bad. Another favorite person.
Thank you. And Kim, you are doing a wonderful job. Thank you, Commissioner, for sharing your evening with us. I would like to introduce our second host for the evening, which is Alexis Martinez. And I would like to read off. Alexis Martinez is a Latino and Apache trans woman who has served the Chicago community for many years. Alexis is the current chairperson of Chicago Therapy Collective and also serves as the court support coordinator for Transformative Law Project. She is passionate about trans health, economic equality. Alexis is a respected trans leader in Chicago and has worked on many organizing campaigns, including marriage equality and the Chicago Dyke March Collective for the past 10 plus years. Alongside her organizing, Alexis is studying to become a paralegal at City Colleges of Chicago. She is an artist and former screen printer, and in her spare time, she enjoyed woodworking and spending time with her two granddaughters. I would like to introduce you, Alexis Martinez.
Thank you so much. I do spend a great deal of time with my granddaughters and, the Transformative Justice Law Project and whatever, because of technical difficulties, I'm gonna have to sort of wing this, okay? Commissioner Brandon, I expected to have your opponent, what's his name, Vallis, on, but I want to ask you some questions, and again, I'm having some technical difficulties, so I'm not getting the questions that the community is asking, but as a community member, I think that some of the things that concern me the greatest are like the resources that go to serving trans people, and not just trans people, but homeless people on the west side and the south side, okay, and Black communities in particular. To me, I look at it as a moral issue, not just an economic issue. How do you propose to solve this problem? Again, it's a budgetary issue. I mean, how would you invest in those communities?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thank you for really laying out the importance of this moral responsibility. Because look, I've been on the other end of these budgetary decisions where people look at these spreadsheets and they don't know the lives that are associated with those spreadsheets, where schools have been defunded, public housing has been defunded and closed, our public transportation system is unreliable and unsafe. You don't need me to go through the list of where the budgetary decisions that have left families behind have just been crushing. And quite frankly, if I can be vulnerable, they've been humiliating, right? When things are taken away from us, we're often blamed, for the crises that we didn't create or cause. And that's why I put forth the budget plan for that very reason. I did it back in January, and we have been picked apart over and over again because we believe in loving people enough to invest in them. And I've stood strong on my budget plan to get rid of the structural deficit that's causing us to lose critical dollars that instead of going towards services, we're paying off debt. And then we're also still going to make up to $1 billion of new investments, and we're going to do it without raising property taxes. I'm the only person who's running for, whether it was the runoff now or the first round, that laid out how we're going to actually, fix the structural deficit and still invest in people. But it's also why I fought hard on the County Board of Commissioners, where there's $100 million that have gone into violence prevention, of which those dollars include going towards housing, mental health services, making sure that the medical debt that many families are suffering from, that we pay off medical debt. Again, universal basic guaranteed income. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in an equity plan that we built at the county level, making those type of investments, from mental health care services to reopening our mental health centers, making sure that we're passing treatment, not trauma. You asked a question about, again, the finances, making sure that we pass Bring Chicago Home, right? We're talking about raising hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of my first term to go into housing, affordable housing, pathway to home ownership, building public housing. I mean, these are all dynamics that exist in safe American cities. And that's what my commitment is. And because, look, we have the benefit of having a movement alongside of us, and all of our interests have collided together at once. This is a unique experience and an opportunity that we have not had in a generation. And the intersectionality of all of the issues, as you described, whether it's mental health, housing, transportation, representation, like all of these elements that we have been fighting for and organizing for a generation now in the city of Chicago, this is our moment to actually get it done. And I'm committed to growing our movement by moving all over the city and even working with people who may not have our values, but understand that a better, stronger, safer Chicago means an equitable, justice Chicago, that we can continue to pull and bring people together for the type of revenue that's going to be needed in order to save lives. Thank you.
Okay, I have another question here from Eric Brown. Here is an important question from the audience. How will your administration help queer students of color experiencing housing insecurity access the public school system and receive safe and supportive housing services so they can be on a path towards success?
Thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that. Look, Eric, thank you for that. I think you said Eric. Thank you for that question, Eric. Look, as I mentioned, the Bring Chicago Home Ordinance, the real estate transfer tax, conservatively anywhere from $120 to $160 million annually. Look, I've been a public school teacher, so I know the unhoused in the city of Chicago, and then when you are queer, and in many cases the affirming that doesn't take place. It's why I'm committed to making sure that not only do we bring Chicago home and raise the revenue, but we also make sure that there are full wraparound services so that every single individual could be on a pathway to a sustainable, strong, healthy life. And that's making sure that schools have social workers, restorative justice, right? Because there's harm that's being, moved in many of our communities. And we need to make sure that we are restoring people so that that harm does not continue and that we're not criminalizing people at the same time. And this is something I'm very much committed to because I've seen the type of frustration and the type of divide and the type of pain ultimately that's caused because we're not affirming young people. That we have 20,000 of our 65,000 people who are on the house, 20,000 of them are Chicago public school students. So yes, our plan to address that. It is a matter of life and death, because when we don't address it, and I hope you all hear my heart when I say this, we don't want young people to take more risk because they're not seen and loved and supported, and ultimately leaving them vulnerable. We have to make sure that our school communities and all of our public spaces are safe, secure spaces that are affirming and supported. And I'm committed to doing that as the mayor of the city of Chicago.
Okay. One of my questions, okay, that again, this is off script because I was expecting Mr. Vallis to show himself up, but 40% of the city budget approximately goes to the CPD. You know, the casino that's coming up is, you know, none of it, not a dime is going to go towards schools or homelessness or anything else. Okay, it's going to go towards the pension fund. And people are calling for increasing the size of the police department. You know, how can, from a budgetary standpoint, how can you address that? You know, because everybody's coming at, they're saying, you know, massive crime waves and everything else. You know, what's the reality, in your opinion, of what that's all about?
Well, I mean, it's the failed politics of old that doesn't work and it's left families behind. You know, we know that, you know, we spend more in policing per capita than anywhere else in the world. And we know the answer to the question, are we any safer? Of course not, because we're not working towards, you know, prevention. And the data has proven us over and over again that youth employment is one example. There's a direct correlation between youth employment and violence reduction. That's why my plan doubles the amount of young people that we're going to hire. It's also about making sure that we are getting at the root causes of violence, right? And making sure that we are passing treatment, not trauma, and opening up our mental health centers. You know, funding our violence prevention programs, the individuals that we talked about earlier in the earlier part of this segment, that those who actually do the work are Black and Brown communities that know how to bring about the type of transformation that we're funding those services. That's ultimately what's going to keep us safe. The last thing that I'll say, you know, last weekend, Woodlawn, they had their annual summit, the 14th annual summit to transform Woodlawn. And they had a beautiful display of what Woodlawn will look like with the proper investments. You know what was missing noticeably, which I believe even intentionally, from their actual display of what Woodlawn would look like? There was no police station. No one builds economic development and community transformation around police stations. They had transportation, housing, you know, hotels, right, businesses. That is ultimately what keeps communities safe and secure. And as this budget has exploded and has been bloated, it hasn't led to safe, healthy, strong communities. And under my administration, I'm very much committed to doing what works. And safe American cities invest in people. That's what I will do as mayor of the city of Chicago.
Apologies, Commissioner. You have to get out of here.
Hey, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the time. I was trying to answer as thoroughly and as quick as possible, trying to answer as many questions. Thank you all so much. I have one more event tonight, so please keep me lifted up in your thoughts. Keep all the positive vibes and energy moving, because we know that a better, stronger, safer Chicago is possible. So God bless you all. Thank you all for your hard work and your love for people. That's the best thing that we can do. They called me a radical because I believe in loving people. And if that's what being radical is, loving people, I'll be that any day. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. That's my motto: peace, love, and joy.
Love it.
Well, thank you all for being here. I'm gonna go ahead and pass it over to Jay and LaTanya. And just one quick announcement. I know we didn't get to a lot of the questions, and we will be sending them on to the commissioner. They agreed to answer them, and then we will be circulating all of these questions back to everyone who was here with us tonight. So thank you for joining us, and passing it back over to my colleagues.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing space with us. Black, Brown, and Indigenous queer communities are an integral part of the vibrant soul of Chicago. And as such, they deserve to hear from the next mayor about their plans to lead from an integrable lens that uplifts all constituents. It is crucial that the next mayor of Chicago is dedicated to fostering dignity and respect for all LGBTQ+ individuals, while also working to address systematic inequities that impact the lives of marginalized communities across the city. Thank you to Equality Illinois, Alma Chicago, Chicago Gay Black Men's Caucus, Brave Space Alliance, Life is Work, the Honorable Kim Hunt, and the legendary Alexis Martinez for joining us, and also Task Force Prevention Center for joining us tonight, and all of you for sharing space with us. And I will pass it off to LaTanya, and also Affinity as well, as one of our sponsors. And LaTanya, I'll pass it off to you. Thank you.
My name is LaTanya Maley. I'm the Executive Director at Affinity Community Services, and I use they or she pronouns. And so thank you all for joining us tonight. Part of what's really important for us is that as many Black and Brown LGBT people feel empowered to make an informed vote on or by April 4th. So we want to just have this call of action to encourage everyone to vote. And if you are not sure how or where to vote, you can please reach out to us. We are here to serve you and make sure that you feel fully involved in the process of choosing Chicago's next leader. And again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight.
I just need to add this. Okay, thank you so much for having me here. I got like really confused about the tech, like where to get Zoom and Zoom in and everything. But that's part of being old. Okay, so I figured it out. And I just thank you so much. I thought legends are dead though. So I always get tickled when people call me a legend.
You are a living legend.
Thank you.
Thank you all
so
for
much.
joining us. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Kim, for your time and dedication, and to all the organizations that put in so much work, so much time to get this historic moment off the ground, and really showing that we are here and don't count us out.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.